The story revolves around Jimmy Logan, a down-on-his-luck man who has recently lost his job and faces the prospect of being separated from his daughter. He devises a daring plan to rob the largest sports center in the USA. With the help of his siblings and a few recruits, they dive into a high-stakes heist. But with their family's streak of bad luck, can they defy the odds and pull off the ultimate score? Hello, welcome back to I Am Movies. Today we'll be looking into the 2017 movie titled Logan Lucky. But before we jump into the details, make sure to show us some love by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Now let's get right into it. The movie begins with Jimmy Logan, who fixes his truck while his smart daughter Sadie assists him. They discuss Sadie's upcoming pageant and she ponders the song to present on her day. Jimmy suggests Country Road by John Denver. Although Sadie agrees it's a great song, she doesn't think it'll be for the occasion. She later opted to sing Umbrella by Rihanna. She asks if Jimmy will attend her rehearsals and he assures her he'll be there. Sadie also mentions that she asked her mom and stepdad to pay for Jimmy's old phone to be fixed, but he asserts that as long as he can take pictures of her, he's fine with it. After a few days, we see Jimmy heads to his job at a small construction company, where he's working on a contract to fix sinkholes. At the end of his shift, his boss Cal delivers the heartbreaking news that they're letting him go. Jimmy inquires about his offense, but Cal tells him he's done nothing wrong. They're only concerned about his limp, which they see as a potential liability. Feeling disheartened, Jimmy leaves frustrated. Despite his mounting troubles, he remains determined to fulfill his fatherly role towards Sadie. He stops by his sister Mellie's hair salon, informing her not to worry about picking up Sadie for her rehearsals, as he'll handle it. However, his sister Mellie informs Jimmy that his daughter's rehearsal was the day before, and Mellie tries contacting Jimmy, but his phone is out of reach due to unpaid bills. Jimmy then drives to his ex-wife Bobby Joe's house to see his daughter. Bobby Joe lives in a large mansion, with her wealthy new husband Moody and his twin boys. Upon reaching the mansion, Jimmy apologizes, claiming he thought the rehearsals were today. Bobby Joe is furious and rants, which amuses Jimmy. Sadie hears Jimmy's voice and runs up to him. He suggests they go have some ice cream, but she informs him she's not allowed to have any. Bobby Joe informs him that they're selling the house and moving across the state due to her husband's business. The news doesn't go down well with Jimmy, and he threatens to get a lawyer as he can't imagine being far from his daughter, especially since he isn't financially capable of making frequent interstate drives. But then, he's also not buoyant enough to hire a lawyer. His day couldn't be any worse. Jimmy knows he has to find a solution as soon as possible. Later that night, he heads to a bar to ease off stress, where his brother Clyde works as a bartender. Clyde, an ex-veteran who lost his lower arm fighting in Iraq, worsens Jimmy's mood by recounting the misfortunes that have plagued their family, which has made people refer to them as bad luck. Jimmy isn't having it and asks him to stop, but he won't, so they get into a minor argument when he takes a walk. Meanwhile, Max, a NASCAR team owner, walks into the bar in the company of his goons, bragging. While Clyde tends to them, they make snide comments about his arm. Jimmy walks in and finds them mocking his brother. He requests they show some respect, reminding them that his brother lost his arm fighting in a war in Iraq. However, Max continues making demeaning comments, prompting Jimmy to engage in a fight with them. Clyde takes a bottle of whiskey, borrows a lighter from their friend Earl, who's smoking outside the bar, and sets their vehicle ablaze. When they come out and see their vehicles on fire, Max, who likes to document everything, instructs his goons to make a video. But Jimmy snatches their phones and throws them into the fire. Afterward, Jimmy says a secret code word, cauliflower, to Clyde before leaving. The word holds significant meaning between them. The next morning, Jimmy serves Clyde his favorite burned bacon for breakfast. Clyde brings up the code word, reminding Jimmy that its last use landed Clyde in juvenile detention center when he was 13. Having seen a robbery rule that Jimmy pasted on the wall, he then asks Jimmy what he has up his sleeves. Jimmy reveals his plan to rob the Charlotte Motor Speedway, the busiest sports center in the USA, and the official home of NASCAR. During his time working in the sinkholes, he discovered a highly secure technological money storage system, used to transport money directly to a bank's main vault through a pneumatic test tube. Jimmy tells Clyde that the perfect time to carry out the heist is during the less busy Grocery Castle Auto Show, noting that there will be less security and staff during the show. To access the money, they have to blow the vault open, and the only man they know who can help them is Joe Bang. Joe Bang is serving jail time for his notorious crimes of blowing up safes to pilfer money, and he has 5 months left. Later, Jimmy and Clyde visit Joe at the Monroe Correctional Center and fill him in on their plans, asking for his help to blow open the vault. Joe is flattered that they regarded him for the job, but he reminds them that he is incarcerated and also has a few months to go and wouldn't want to mess it up. He also adds that he already has money stashed away and doesn't need the robbery. but they tell him that his idiot brother Fishy somehow mentioned it to his wife, and she dug up the money and ran away with it. Joe is stunned by this news and is now interested with Jimmy and Clyde's offer. He then discloses that the vault is protected with seismic sensors, and going close to it will set off the alarm. But Jimmy informs him that there's construction going on in the mines, and the sensors are turned off. Joe finally agrees to help them, so they fill him in on how they plan to break him out in broad daylight and have him back before anyone notices. Joe then requests they involve his two brothers, Fishy and Sam, for his interest's sake, so Jimmy and Clyde go in search of Joe's brothers. They finally find them playing silly games at the Easter Fair. Jimmy and Clyde recruit them and share the part of the plan they need them to know. Later, Fishy and Sam visit their brother Joe Bang at the prison, and he instructs them to go to the woods and collect a bag from the bear. As planned, they start off with Clyde, who then drives his car through the window of a convenience store at a gas station, and ends up in court. Considering his service to the country, the judge sentenced him to 90 days in prison. Meanwhile, their sister Melly, who is now on the plan, follows a prison truck and has provided Clyde with measurements to craft undercarriages for the prison truck that leaves the facility every day, as they plan to use these to escape. As soon as Clyde arrives at the prison, they wasted no time as him and Joe start crafting the woodwork. While his master plan is in progress, Jimmy fulfills his fatherly duty to his daughter by taking her to get ready for her big talent show, including a trip to a self-tan and hair salon. While Jimmy waits outside his sister's salon, he encounters a healthcare worker named Sylvia. She notices an open wound on his face and asks if he's had a tetanus shot recently, but Jimmy doesn't seem to remember. Fortunately, they're on a free health tour, so she takes him to her van and gives him a shot. During their conversation, Jimmy realizes Sylvia was his junior in high school and recalls a minor history with her when she was driving away. Back home, Melly is busy with the heist plan, color-coding a bunch of cockroaches they'll be using for a test. She asks Jimmy if he has a plan B if plan A goes awry, but Jimmy confidently assures her that everything will work as planned. The next morning, Jimmy sneaks into his former office to steal the blueprint plan for the sinkholes, which he'll need for the heist. On his way out, he runs into his former boss, who apologizes for relieving him of his job. Jimmy assures him that there are no hard feelings. Cal informs Jimmy that the sinkhole is nearing completion, and they will be leaving the site soon anyway. This news hits Jimmy hard, knowing it's a wrench in his plans. But Jimmy is determined and doesn't back down, so he decides to move the heist up by a week, coinciding with the biggest and busiest event of the year, the Coca-Cola 600 race. The following day, Melly sends an anonymous cake to Glima, the bank manager. She takes the cake back to the vault and shares it with her co-workers while wondering who may have sent it. Subsequently, one of her colleagues interrupts and informs her to go out from the vault and check her car, as someone dents it, and by the time she gets back, she realizes that the vault has locked automatically with her cake inside. Later that night, Fishy and Sam access the tube through the sinkholes and release the color-coded cockroaches into different tubes to determine which one leads to the vault from the Charlotte Motor Speedway. The following day, when Glima arrives at work, she finds cockroaches all over her cake, prompting her to let out a scream. They call exterminators immediately, which Fishy and Sam disguise themselves as, and that's how they discover the color of the cockroaches that made it to the vault. Meanwhile, Joe Bang meets Naaman and two other inmates, the toughest guys in the facility, and recruits them. Everything is going perfectly as planned, and finally, it's race day. With the same day of Sadie's pageant, Melly picks up Sadie, drives her to her pageant, and tells her that she needs to take care of something at the salon, and will be back in time to give her final touches before her presentation. Back at the correctional center, Joe pretends to be sick while eating at the cafeteria and starts to throw up all over the floor. The egocentric Chief Warden Burns witnesses this and orders them to take him to the sanitarium. Moments later, Joe tells the nurse that he needs to use the bathroom, and she offers him a potty to avoid getting lightheaded. Joe pretends to be shy about using a potty, but she tells him she is not taking him. Just then, Clyde walks in and offers to help him to the bathroom. When they reach the bathroom, Joe and Clyde escape through the vents and hide under the correctional facility vehicle. Meanwhile, at the gas station where the Monroe Correctional Facility vehicle typically stops to refuel, Melly is waiting for them in an unreleased Ford Shelby GT350 stolen from Moody. Once the truck arrives, they discreetly sneak out from under and join Melly, and she zooms off while Joe and Clyde quickly change their clothes. In the meantime, a fight breaks out among Naaman and the other inmates, escalating into a riot and prompting a lockdown, which conceals Joe and Clyde's escape. Amidst the chaos, one of the officials attempts to call for external help, but Burns instructs him to put the phone down, stating that all is well in Monroe. The inmates hold 3 officers hostage in the cafeteria while making demands before they can release them. Since their demand seems unattainable at the moment, they refuse to let them go. At the Speedway, Fishy and Sam detonate the cell tower to disable the credit card machines, forcing all vendors to accept cash only. Due to the high influx of cash, Speedway employees are instructed to continuously send cash down the pneumatic tube. Upon entering the arena, Joe buys some gummy bears and beer. As the race begins, Joe and Clyde meet up with Jimmy in the tube room. Once there, they get down to business. Jimmy hands Joe bleach pens and a plastic bag as requested, and he prepares an explosive mixture from bleach, low-sodium salt, and gummy bears. Jimmy and Clyde are left petrified, as they had expected Joe to use dynamite of some sort. However, Joe lectures them about the mixture, telling them to relax. The first attempt to blow up the vault fails hilariously, as the capsule containing the mixture returns. But Joe figures out the issue and fixes it. The explosion finally works, and they quickly connect a giant vacuum to the tubes to suck cash from the vault into garbage bags set up by Fishy and Sam. However, the smoke from the explosion escapes from the other end of the tube in the stalls. The workers contact the E-Center, but they confirm there's no fire, leaving them wondering where the smoke is coming from. So they just send 2 security officers to check out the basement. Back at the correctional center, the inmates continue their rebellious acts as they block the cameras and seal up the windows to prevent the wardens from seeing them. While Jimmy and his cohort successfully carry out their heist and have fun with it, they ask him to increase the vacuum's momentum, but it spirals out of control, spraying money all over the place. They ignorantly put the vacuum in reverse, and it sucks in Clyde's prosthetic arm. They get into an argument, which infuriates Clyde. He worries that the robbery will be linked to him if the arm is found, so he frantically tries to cut the vacuum, but Jimmy calms him down and promises him he'll get it out. They continue with their robbery. Fishy and Sam drive the money they stashed in the garbage bags to Jimmy's truck, and on their way out, they encounter the security men sent to check out the source of the smoke. The officers, believing they are garbage collectors, ask if they saw a fire, but the brothers tell them there's nothing of that sort. The security men then spot smoke coming out of a door, and when they open it, they find Earl, a friend of the Logan brothers, smoking a cigarette during his 20-minute break. They instruct him to put out the cigarette and get back to work, assuming that must be where the smoke is coming from, and they end their search. Jimmy also encounters the guards on his way to check why the Bang brothers have yet to return, even after asking Joe to go check what's keeping his brothers. They ask if he smells a fire, but he says he doesn't smell any fire. Jimmy finds them trying to force the exit gate open, and he stops them, checks, and sees that it is jammed. Jimmy and Joe return to the tube room, while Fishy and Sam continue to Jimmy's truck. He instructs Joe and Clyde to leave so they can return to the facility in time. However, Max and his star driver, Dayton White, are having a heated argument below the Speedway. Max is mad at him for losing the race, and Dayton reminds him that it's his fault. Before the race began, Max had compelled Dayton to gulp down his energy drink, despite his warning Max that his system may not tolerate it. Being on a strict diet for the past few months, the drink has had an adverse effect, causing him to pass out while driving and crash into the barricades. While they argue, Joe and Clyde run into them on their way out. Max recognizes Clyde from the bar, and Clyde beats him up. Melly, who's been waiting in the car outside, drives them back to the correctional facility. Afterward, Jimmy dumps his cap and jacket in the waste bin and smoothly leaves the arena, making sure the money is safe in his truck. Just as instructed and at the right time, Nayman signals to one of the inmates to start a fake fire to trigger the alarm. The egocentric warden hesitates to call the fire service, but he soon succumbs to pressure and lets them call the fire service. Joe and Clyde disguise themselves as firefighters and join the Monroe fire truck back to the correctional center. They change into their uniform and sneak back into the correctional center and back to their previous position as soon as the lockdown is lifted, leaving no trace of suspicion. Melly makes it in time to help Sadie get ready for her talent show. She asks after her dad, but Melly informs her that she doesn't know where he is. It's Sadie's turn to present Umbrella by Rihanna, and as she climbs the stage, she spots her dad walking in. She then tells the audience that she will sing Country Roads, which is her dad's favorite song, making Jimmy all emotional. Jimmy and the audience join his daughter in the song. Sadie ends up winning the Miss West Virginia pageant, making herself and everyone proud. However, later that night, Jimmy packs his truck stacked with the money they stole from the Charlotte Motor Speedway at a gas station and tips the police about it, having previously reported the truck missing, so they recover the money. Upon hearing the news about the money, everyone involved in the heist is disgruntled and doesn't understand why Jimmy put them through all the trouble only to return the stolen money. Some weeks later, Clyde is released from prison, and he moves in with his sister, having cut off contact with their brother Jimmy, who's moved to Lynchburg and takes up a job. Meanwhile, an FBI agent, Sarah Grayson, is investigating the robbery case. She tends to connect some plausible dots on who the perpetrators are, but there's no concrete evidence due to their airtight alibis. Max contacts the police department, claiming to be an eyewitness, prompting Agent Grayson to interview him. He alleges seeing Clyde and Joe in the Speedway tunnel on race day, claiming responsibility for his broken nose. He also asserts that his driver, Dayton, could corroborate his story, but the disgruntled Dayton denies any knowledge of it, discrediting Max's eyewitness account. Subsequently, Grayson visits the Monroe Correctional Facility to pursue her investigation. Despite her efforts, Burns refuses to divulge information about the riot and rebellion at the correctional center, a setback for Grayson. 5 months later, Joe Bang is released from prison and visits Clyde at the bar inquiring about Jimmy. Clyde claims he hasn't been in touch with Jimmy since the heist. Meanwhile, the president of the Charlotte Motor Speedway receives an insurance settlement for the unrecovered money, requesting Grayson to close the case. Unbeknownst to Joe and his brothers, Jimmy, Clyde, and Melly had secretly stashed extra cash during the heist, which Earl took to the dump. Jimmy later retrieves the money from the dump. After the heist's dust settles, everyone involved directly and indirectly in the heist receives a handsome payout later. Joe finds cash buried in his yard, Naaman receives a fat envelope upon his release from prison, Gleema gets a box of cash, and even Sylvia receives a donation for medical facilities. Jimmy, now living close to his daughter and ex-wife and working at the Lowe's store, he frequently visits her daughter with Bobby Joe's assurance that Jimmy can have all the time in the day with their daughter Sadie. That night, Jimmy went to visit his brother Clyde in the bar, and is happy to reunite with Melly, Joe, and Sylvia, whom he is now dating. While they are drinking, a lady asks her drink and Clyde apologizes for forgetting it. As he pours her a drink, she asks him to pour himself one so they can toast together. Clyde asks if she's from there, and she tells Clyde that she is passing through but thinks she will stay for a while. As they toast, it is revealed that it is Agent Grayson, who is up on their tail, ending the movie with a smile. If you'd like to see us recap any other movies or topics you have in mind, just drop a comment and let us know. And don't forget to hit the like button, share this recap, and subscribe to stay updated for the next one. Until next time.